Hello, everyone, and welcome to our fourth practice management webinar of 2023. I'm Brandon, the founder of AdvisorFlow, and also an independent financial advisor in Vancouver, British Columbia. We're thrilled to have you here today. We're going to talk about some strategies to grow your insurance block of business in 2024. Our goal is that you're going to leave today with some actionable strategies that you can implement in your business. Your feedback is valuable, so we encourage you to share your thoughts to help us improve these sessions. So for today, Jake is going to kick things off, sharing some successful strategies for his business. He's a prominent member of KLU, and I've had the pleasure of seeing him present at last year's event. Next up, we'll have Charlie, who's going to discuss the power of presentation. He's the founder of Life Design Analysis. Although they're not from the same company, and though their company names are similar, they are both leaders in the insurance industry. I'll round things out by discussing the power of templating in needs analysis documentation before we open up into our standard Q&A. We're also launching a couple of new templates within AdvisorFlow, so I'll briefly touch on those today. Over the past year and a half, we've hosted several educational events, such as integrating technology, buying books of business, and niche marketing. You can access these previous events at advisorflow.ca/webinars. Check them out, and if there's other topics you want to see, please let us know. At AdvisorFlow, we're deeply committed to the success of our financial advisor community, and we believe that by collaborating, our industry will continue to thrive. In an era where technology continues to streamline admin tasks, and we've got influencers pushing Canadians in the wrong direction, the Canadians are really craving financial advice, and that's where we come in. So without further ado, let's dive into our webinar and introduce Jake. Jake works alongside his father, Joe Sheehan, and they work with business owners and professionals who are challenged by the complexity of integrating insurance, investment, tax, and retirement planning. They believe their clients need new tools for navigating this environment on their own and in conjunction with their key advisors. Their goal is to help clarify what the current situation is and provide a learning platform as they help model future scenarios. And he's going to talk us through some of that today. He brings a strong analytical background to his team, and they've got a pretty unique modeling system, which I'm looking forward to learning more about today. Jake holds his chartered life underwriter, trust and estate practitioner, as well as the family enterprise advisor certificate. He's been a member of KLU since 2014 and recently joined the STEP membership committee. Jake, welcome.
Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate that. And thanks for having me here today. So, what I was going to talk about today is maybe not necessarily how to grow your business, but maybe how we are growing our business. Because I feel like I'm not really there yet, but it's always going to be a work in progress. So I figured I would break things down in sort of three different areas where we would call our sort of practice management. Brandon, if you could just cue up the next slide. Our sort of practice management approach, sort of our business plan, how we approach our client files being, our planning first approach, and then as well as our team approach working with other advisors, other advisors being accountants and lawyers and other professional advisors. So where I'll start is on the practice management side. And next slide, Brennan. So yeah, that'd be great. So what I would do, what would happen with us is I work, as Brendan mentioned, I work with my father, Joe, and we've been working together since about 2009. We had a bit of an inflection point around 2017 after the madness of the end of 2016, if you remember that. And we had this point where Joe was sort of burnt out and saying, I want some time off. And I was saying, let's keep our foot on the gas. And that was a big point for us to realize we needed a plan. We were just kind of run and gun up until that point. We didn't have a lot of systems in place, a lot of protocols. And so we said, we need a plan and we need to write it down. So we happened to start with a coach, a guy named Art Schooley, who was an amazing coach for us. He really helped build our CRM, categorize our clients. He helped a ton with our internal communications, how we work with members of our team. And that was an invaluable resource in formalizing a lot of the business management side of our business. So again, working with a coach really helped. The carriers have a lot of resources. I know Sun Life does a lot through their SPP program in terms of marketing approach, support, and things like that. So again, I would lean on those resources as well. But then make a plan. And so I thought it'd be helpful to sort of share what our plan was back then, at least some of the core concepts. So, where we start with was our core message. And that was really, at the end of the day, what are we trying to do here? For us, it sort of boils down in some shape or form to we're trying to help people. We're trying to help people understand their finances, deal with insurance, deal with, in the event of death and disability, these difficult issues. But we really just want to help people. So that was as much as we could distill that down. And then this really helped with whenever we were sort of working on files or we were in the trenches and we're dealing with all areas of the planning. We were maybe confused on where to go or where to focus. We went back in terms of saying, what are we trying to do? And that was help people. And that really helped clarify or maybe recalibrate, what we were doing there. So the next slide there. So the next one was what was our offering? Basically, how are we going to deliver on that core message? And for us, that was our process, which is our sort of planning first, our client first approach, which I'll go into in a minute. And then the tools and resources. So basically what supported us on supporting our clients. Next one being the sources for new business. So, we need to create new opportunities, create new relationships in our business. And so what was our plan for doing that? We broke that. And again, it was sort of each case is going to be unique. So for us, we broke it down into saying, well, we've got about a 50-year-old block of business that we're not tapping into at all. So that's where Art Schooley really helped us sort of categorize clients, build out a CRM. We now, I feel like now we're just scratching the surface of how we use a CRM and mining our block, which I know Charlie's going to get into. But for us, where we're at with our CRM, we basically run 3 reports, which again, it's embarrassingly low. But one is basically who's got a date of birth next month, what are the term policies that have an anniversary next month, and what are the insurance ages that are changing next month. So basically next month, who's got a birthday 6 months from now, 7 months from now. And that, again, it's just simple stuff that gave us a report every month, that gave us a fresh list of people to check in on. And it was just that basic stuff that helped churn a lot of business out of our existing block. The second area was centers of influence or COIs. So again, making that list in our business plan and then making protocols to go back in and check in with those people. And I'll talk a little bit more about COIs in a little bit, but that's a big area where we spend a lot of time and a lot of analysis on how to get the most out of those relationships. And then the third pillar of our new business was social, sort of just basically spending time where our ideal clients are. That was probably the toughest part for me, is converting those relationships, starting up those. That was Joe's strong suit, my dad. And then, so we needed this plan to work without that. So hence the first 2 pillars didn't require that, but certainly an important area. And then the last there is tracking. So in the plan, how are we going to track that data? Both the financial data, the revenue data, the sort of touch points, where business is coming from. It took a long time to trial and error, collecting that data as we go. And then at the end of the day, reflecting on that to figure out, sort of how we're going to recalibrate the maps based on what's working and what's not working. So this sort of infrastructure that we work with, just on the next slide there. So what we've got is our CRM. We've recently changed over from Equisoft to Zoho with the help of an advisor and a consulting firm called Blue Root. I can sort of dive into that in the Q&A section later, but from a high level, Zoho has the capability to customize a lot of the reporting, a lot of the templates. And so far, we've really enjoyed that. Next one is the calendar. Just on a day-to-day basis, I am militant with my calendar in terms of just making the most of our time and being as efficient as possible. So everything is very regimented in terms of the meeting reminders, so that, again, we're just being protective of our time and making the most use of our clients' time. Next one is Calendly. I would sort of put that into the category of, if you know, you know. It is just a fantastic piece of software where you can send a link and someone can book a meeting directly in your calendar. I've had one person push back on it, and what followed was emails back and forth about, well, what about next Tuesday? Well, can't do that. Next Thursday. And it really showed how valuable that software is. So definitely encourage you to try that out, or some comparable software. The next one is Todoist. It's my task list. I sort of live in my task list every day. Again, we try to bat above our weight class. And so to the extent that we can be as efficient as possible with our time every day, that's going to really help get us to where we're going. So Todoist is nice in that you can sort of categorize, and I sort of prioritize and color code. These are the calls I need to make today. These are the presentations I need to work on, or the models, and really helps things keep it nice and clean. The next one is a mindfulness practice, which again is sort of I still feel like a big rookie there, but I give credit to my dad, Joe, on this one, where in that mayhem of 2016, 2017, it was just like running around with our hair on fire. And he really urged me to start the day with this mindfulness practice, which was, his theory was 10 minutes of reading and 10 minutes of meditation. It's sort of maybe a little bit less than that, 5 to 10 minutes of reading and a couple minutes of meditation, but it's something, and it's habit, and it's every day. And this book that's on the screen, 1 Second Ahead, was my sort of starting place for that. It's a very practical handbook to how to incorporate mindfulness into a professional life. So, how to incorporate that into calendars and emails and meetings. And it was just amazing to get this practical guide to really help focus where you're going. And specifically reading at the start of the day I found helpful, because again, you have this task list with 40 things on it, and that little moment of calm at the start to say, okay, what's really important, what on my list needs to get done, what doesn't need to get done, what can be delegated. That's just an absolute integral part of our practice now. And then the next one just being outlets. So balancing the sort of craziness of taking on and expanding the business with everything else going on, is just having a break to sort of let your quiet mind come up. And I found that the more you sort of emphasize that, the more productive things became. I know I'm going quickly here, but I'm covering a lot of ground here. I want to leave lots of time for the other guys. So on the planning approach, what our planning process looks like in terms of going back to how we grew the business, we didn't go out and said, let's sell bigger files. We just figured if we do good work with good people, good things will happen. And so the process was really meant to help people. And then out of that, the size of the files started to grow, and so did the business. So what our approach is, we find a lot of our clients do their planning in silos, both with the technical side in terms of how they're looking at maybe their insurance over there, their investments, their corporate planning, but then also their professionals are very siloed. And so what we try to do is build this platform. Brandon, you just go to the next slide. Was to create this platform so that the client could really see how all the pieces of the planning are working together, or not working together in some cases. And so again, putting everything on one page, the corporate assets, the investments, the insurance, they could really help see how these things work and interact. And then also with the professionals is collaborating that, or bringing them around the same clear information, so that everyone's working with the same picture. Next slide. So our process looks like this, where we're clarifying the current equation, meaning that we're getting the assets, the liabilities, the ownership structures very clear. At this point, we're clarifying who the professionals are and potentially connecting with them. From there, we're going to run a model. So we want to see those projections. We're dealing with life insurance, usually for tax planning and estate planning purposes. And so we want to see what that looks like in the future. So to do estate planning and this type of life insurance without running a model, my perception is you're just driving blind, or you're just selling a product. So we always want to run that model out. And then the last part is, understanding and implementing. Once you've done those first 2 steps, a lot of opportunities will come out, whether it's corporate reorgs, freezes, redoing the wills, insurance. And so helping the client not just sort of dump that onto their plate and let them go their way, helping them actually execute on that kind of stuff. So how we do that, getting the designations. So as Brendan mentioned, the CFP, the CLU, the TEP, and the FEA. The CFP and the CLU I find would be sort of mandatory when you're dealing with sort of financial planning and integrating with insurance. The TEP and the FEA, TEP to go really deep into trust and estates, and then the FEA sort of working with families are great resources. Also definitely going to help in terms of talking with the accountants and lawyers. The next point there is the, finding a good platform and then spending 10,000 hours in it. So again, the more we get to know the clients in terms of building out those models or those financial plans, the more we're going to really understand the intricacies and then find the opportunities. But it takes a lot of work in there. Every case is unique. And so there's always sort of finding new issues and then finding and then researching. But I give Michael Curtis at VisionWorks a ton of credit. I worked with him a couple of years ago for a year, and he was like, their software is very intricate. And we learn a lot in terms of if you can operate that, then you definitely know what you're doing with respect to financial planning. We build most of our models in Excel, but then we also work with Planworth, which is very comprehensive software. So you can handle any type of corporate complexity, but then also delivers a very smooth and simplified version of what the outputs are. And I know I'm going really fast here. I'll just keep going. So make it practical. Again, there's a lot of processes. We get a lot of clients that say we try to go through this process at the bank or something, and they just ask for too many inputs. We'll take whatever the client can give us to start with. Of course, the more you put in, the more you get it out. But starting somewhere, even simple models, on smaller files, someone that's got a mortgage and having kids, is just to say, look, if you got a $1.2 million mortgage and you got $2 million of insurance and you spend $200,000 a year, this is the basic math on, taking that $1 million mortgage off. And then it kind of just provides some context. And again, we'll sort of grow that case size just with that objective reflection of the facts. It's the next one there. Again, going back to what they're trying to do. So again, we're not selling products. We're trying to help them achieve their goals. So it's a simple thing and sounds a bit hokey, but can really help deliver a more refined product. Next one there is implementation plan. I kind of talked a bit about that one. Maybe I'll just skip that one for now. And then be patient. So this is especially on the larger files. I'll go into this a little bit more, but it's the biggest thing that I've sort of learned over the last 15 years is nothing moves as fast as you want it to. On the larger life side, there's always going to be other professionals involved, or maybe different strategies that are running concurrently or sequentially. And so this is where, again, I use Todoist as saying I set a reminder in however long it's going to take, and then I just go into something else. That really helps to sort of peace of mind on dealing with these files that are just going to take a lot longer than you want them to. So what this actually looks like there, we build out these org charts. Again, it just makes life a lot easier when we're looking at a clear set of facts. And a lot of times when we're building this, it's a lot of cleanup. The client doesn't understand it. If we're explaining something like a freeze, we'll use this so that we can say, okay, here's what a family trust looks like. Brandon, if you just click through this, we'll use these basic animations to sort of explain to a client that would rather deal with anything but talking about share reorgs, basically what we're talking about with a freeze so that they can make a decision and go back to what they'd rather be doing. With respect to the life insurance, of course, once we have this and then the model built, then we can start talking about their tax liability. So you go to the next slide, you can sort of see where a tax liability might start and then where it's going based on the client's growth projections. So from there, we'll say, it helps draw some light on what that risk is. We go to the next slide, we can layer in, here's their existing insurance, and that kind of shows that shortfall. The cost of a freeze. So again, if we are able to successfully freeze, some assets we can, some we can't. It makes it very obvious the value of something like that. And then if we are using insurance to cover off that tax liability, how that's going to layer in on top. The next slide, again, is more just the ways to present the facts. And then it's not us talking about you have a $22 million tax liability. It's a statement of fact. From there, they don't necessarily need insurance, they need funding. And if that funding isn't going to come out of liquidity, that's where insurance comes in. In this case, there was an age gap between the spouses. And so again, having the facts all up in one page, you could see, okay, the liquid assets are probably going to be required for the surviving spouse. We may need insurance to cover off that shortfall. Next slide, again, is saying you don't need insurance. We just needed cash in the estate. So in this case, if they needed 20 million, we could save up money. We show the tax inefficiency of that. We could liquidate assets. And of course, we're paying tax on that to then cover off that estate tax. And then in both of those cases, what's left over is we've lost the opportunity cost there. So again, it's saying insurance is a viable option for this. It's that sort of cents on the dollar concept, where we can show the cost of insurance to cover off that $20 million tax liability is always going to be a better alternative than those other structures. Finance solutions, again, on the news version of this slide, there's a big healthy asterisk saying it's not free insurance, and we sort of go into that, but again, it's to get people's attention there. So on the next slide there is just this sort of timeline on how long these larger cases take. Is in this case, we were dealing with a family in 2014. We started off sort of answering questions they had that they were being sold an IFA on a 20-year-old, and just really didn't understand it. And when I sort of brought up like, well, this debt component, they were like, what debt? So again, it's sort of being sold as free insurance. So in there, we helped them just set up small policies on the kids. Later on, 2019, a couple of years later, we're sitting there doing annual review, and G1 walks by the office and says, do you think we should buy a trust? We sort of said, if you think you can buy a trust, then we have sort of bigger issues. So went back in, ran our sort of what we call our crash test. The first item was reviewing the planning team. So as much as we want to talk about insurance there was bigger issues about reviewing who's on the team and how is the structure working. 2021, we have our first discussions about life insurance. And then it kind of throughout that process, even more cans of worms got open. So it was July 2023, we sort of settled that new insurance, which would sort of categorize as a sort of large case. And then even now we're starting to work with the extended family. So if you look at that timeline, it's just, things just take a long time. I don't really have a solution for that, but, and I'm just looking at the clock. Maybe I'll skip a couple slides there, Brandon, just down to the planning team. This is something I will actually just reference there. The Building a Story Brand book by Donald Miller, again, really helped tell the story. Whenever we're going through these presentations on life insurance, they can be pretty dull. And so this was a great framework to say, like, to really help deliver our message of saying, why are we talking about life insurance, and really painting that picture before we get into the big wall of numbers, right? But as we can go next, and just talk quickly about the planning team. So this is a big area of our practice where we probably spend most of our time now, where again, on the next slide there, a lot of our clients are in the middle of their advisors. And if we just go to the next slide, what we try to build is this collaborative team around them so that everyone is talking and integrating. And this is probably where we find we bring the biggest value. Anyways, I think I'm a bit over time now, so maybe we can come back to this in the Q&A, but that's about as fast as I can get through things. Hopefully there are some things there where we can kind of go into later. But for now, I guess I'll introduce Charlie. So Charlie and I have very similar firm names, but are not related. Where I really like what Charlie's doing is on the visuals. Again, we use a ton of visuals. Like those wall of numbers on insurance illustrations are pretty tough to chew through for clients. And so I really like what he's doing with how they present those numbers, as well as what they're doing on helping advisors mine through their blocks of business and finding a lot of opportunities. So that I'll pass it over to Charlie.
Thanks very much, Jake. And Brandon, thanks very much for having us today to speak on a topic I am obviously very, very passionate about, and that's growing your block of business, specifically your insurance block of business. In sort of thinking about the topic, I really went back to how I was brought into this industry. So much like Jake, my stepfather was actually the one who basically brought me in on an off day from working at TD Bank at the time, and kind of with the question of saying, you know, what can technology do for my life insurance practice? And at the time, and again, this is 12 years ago, I didn't really know much about what an independent advisor did. So I sort of thought I was going to go in, help him, set up Dropbox, help him network the computer so that they could share files and things like that with his two administrative assistants. But as I went in, I sort of said, Larry, if I'm going to recommend technology to you and really help you scale this business of yours, I need to really fully understand it. And so I'd like you to sell me some insurance. And that sort of ensued my introduction really more as a consumer than from the advisor perspective, because Larry, he said to me, well, Charlie, you've got to look at some of this term product out there. You've got different variations, T10, 20, 30, but I want you to know about this UL that lasts for your whole life. And we've also got this whole life product out there. And, essentially he handed me the illustration software. So I watched him sort of go through different illustration softwares, updating them, printing out, 30-page documents, text only numbers, all formatted differently. And, sort of the engineering, my background is actually mechanical engineering. So it was kind of my engineering side that went back and said, I got to go ahead and crunch these numbers and really see what the differences are in these products. And, as I sort of crunched the numbers and understood the product sets, I really saw a lot of value for the consumer in longer term products. And Larry would always sort of say, term insurance is like a diaper. And at some point you do have to change it. And I kind of sillily asked him the question. I said, well, Larry, why don't you sell this whole life stuff all the time? And he sort of, tongue in cheek, wouldn't that be great? And, as I saw it, I said, well, no, like if you actually could communicate the value of these products much easier to clients, and you weren't dumping 100 pages of text and numbers for them to figure it out, or, spending the time to crunch the numbers in Excel and like Jake's doing, displaying those visuals. And so that was really my secret sauce that we started on. And it was, the visuals with how we would present insurance options to clients. So, when I met Larry, he was, he had been in the business in total about 53 years, and he was, top of the table producer. He would do around 700 FYC per year. And the first year we started sort of implementing these visuals within his practice and presenting, sort of the options to clients, always sort of giving them more than one option and matching the product to their time frame. Because we would see that obviously there was efficiency in selling longer term product, but it also benefited his FYC. First year we doubled it, taking him to 1.4 million. The second year we actually doubled it even more. We brought it all the way to almost $3.3 million in FYC. And I really always joke, my handicap as I sort of automated this system and built out what is life design analysis today, my golf handicap is dropping and dropping. And Larry obviously recognized this. He's very happy that his FYC has tripled effectively in a short period of time. But we're starting to get questions from different wholesalers and different insurance companies. What are you doing? What are the reasons for the success? And as I said, there was kind of two core pillars around that. One was visuals, and Brandon, you can flip to the next slide if you'd like. And, it was sort of, I really like this graphic, if you have 1 second, which option is better? And this is sort of what I was faced with as a consumer when I sort of got introduced to this product. And, when we think about how people actually consume information, so most people are visual learners, like about 50% of our brain is actually set up to process images. And, further to that, 70% of the sensory receptors you have are in your eyes. So, we really are geared to be visual learners, whether we like it or not. There's some really great studies out there. They'll put the same dish on two different plates. One will be presented, and plated extremely nice. The other haphazardly put on there. Exact same food. But when people are asked which one tastes better, again, they've eaten with their eyes first. I always love the example of road signs. There's a reason why road signs are symbols rather than text and numbers. And it's, how much faster we can actually retain that information and process it. So it takes less than 1 second to assess, I think it's 0.01 seconds to assess a visual scene, where it takes a lot longer to process these text and numbers. And so when we were able to communicate successfully the value of, say, a higher CDA credit or a longer term product that matches a person's need, we were also more persuasive in our argument as to why that product was suitable. And in fact, we always do what's right for the client. I think that's one of the things about advisors that I admire the most. But we actually had sort of the reverse happening, that where now clients were asking for the more expensive product, the longer term product, or the whole life product. So it was a really big shift in terms of the way, sort of we operated. And again, this is, if you have 1 second to determine if you see the kind of the image on screen, it really did not take long for us to communicate, which one has the higher CDA value when we use a chart. things like a term policy renewal. A lot of people, sort of discount the future. They look at, $1,000 premium for a term 10 versus $30,000 for a whole life, and they would immediately shut off. However, when we converted them into visuals, that's where we really saw success with, sort of breaking down the barriers and having people actually see the value in the product that, traditionally they had thought of as boring insurance or stale, sort of numbers and text. And so it really helped us break through kind of that engagement gap. Now, as I was learning the, sort of these patterns in the insurance industry, my second sort of big realization and the way, of course, once we realized these visuals were being incredibly successful within, sort of our client base. Again, I mentioned, 67% of people are visual learners. The stat is something like 8 out of 10 people are confused by insurance options. Most times I joke with advisors, they say it's 100%. I find the funny thing about these sort of stats that were posted in advisor.ca is that, most of the clients surveyed, I think 63% said they would be wanting to buy more insurance if they actually understood it. 70% of the people thought they were actually underinsured, but they weren't taking action. Again, you can see sort of the, sort of the road sign in terms of, if we had to read road signs going down the 401 in text and numbers, not only is there, sort of a language barrier there, but it also takes a lot longer. So again, an icon or an image can be instantly associated with a message and retained longer. So, once we had sort of established our fundamentals in terms of, these visuals are working with our clients and we're successfully able to communicate the best solution for their options, a lot of times, we would know even if a client was strictly looking at term and we knew maybe a term 10 was the best for them, we simply wanted them to know the term 20 was an option for them. And by doing so, it's sort of an asymmetrical dominance thing, or they sometimes called the three bears effect, where when you have a good, better, best, it really, even if this expensive option is something you can't possibly afford, just knowing that it's out there and validates your choice of what one is right for you was something that was, again, extremely effective. Now, the next thing was, of course, we have to scale this ability. So if we're more successful with the presentations we give, the only other part of the equation is how many presentations can we get out there? And how can we scale that up to be much, much faster? Again, taking away sort of all the barriers that Larry was doing, quoting in different systems. So essentially LDA automated that process of quoting, comparing and crunching the numbers, producing the visual, and then ultimately sharing it with our clients. And so in scaling up and saying, okay, well, how do we find, sort of these clients that are most going to benefit from actually gaining a complete understanding of either what they purchased or the road they're on? And that was through the in-force book of business. And so, as I sort of learned with Larry in the first couple of years about the different product patterns, I sort of asked questions like, so you mean every single term 10 that you sold, and Larry had about 700 clients when I came on board, every single one of those term policies has a ticking time clock or, has a diaper that needs to be changed soon. So I developed a process essentially that I could aggregate all of these in-force policies into life design analysis. So we kind of pioneered a process with the carriers where we could bring in this information, cleanse it down, and we would actually rank these opportunities. So again, we would rank them into high, medium, and low. We would rank things like term conversions, term exchanges, and term 20 conversions and overdue policies. And really all this data previously was something that was trapped in his filing cabinet. So he was a lot, when Jake talks about, we look at, kind of birthdays or waiting for that sort of renewal letter that comes out and says, a client has 60 days until your term policy goes from $1,000 to $10,000. And I sort of, again, came back to that consumer side and said, if I got a letter saying in December, let's say, around the holidays and said, you have 3 months to get medical evidence, maybe get a little bit healthier and apply for insurance, it could leave a lot of people in a lurch. And so what we did is we started approaching people early, and we started saying, anyone with a term policy needs to see the path that they're on, essentially their existing premium schedule, versus what they could convert to. And we would show them a UL and a whole life in a comparison. Again, hugely successful in terms of, finding your most critical opportunity and presenting the right sort of information. So even the exchanges, if we could move someone from a T10 to a T20 with no medical evidence, it was a great way to extend sort of that client's insurance without much hassle, but it was also a valuable sales opportunity. And again, regardless of if they took advantage of it, it was something that we thought was right for the client to explain their options. And a lot of those presentations, led to term conversions. And that's where we were essentially the most successful, was simply showing, here's your term policy. And even if we would model out, even if you stay healthy and, your Superman, prices even stay the same, here's what that would look like versus converting to a permanent product. So really in conjunction, the in-force part of it drives the opportunity in terms of which clients we want to go to. But we developed the system to a point and where it is today that essentially, we'll notify advisors of upcoming opportunities. So we'll aggregate the entire book of business in there, rank those opportunities in terms of urgency. So, based on issue date and product type, what are your high value or your urgent opportunities? We even have filters for overdue term 10 policies, as an example. A lot of advisors buy books of business and quickly need to categorize them for that opportunity and go out to clients and present those. And LDA actually, not only notifies advisors of it, but because we have quoting as well as in-force, we're sort of unique in that sense, unlike, say any other traditional CRM, which again, you may be able to run a birthday report, but when ours actually identifies an opportunity, we quote on it. Again, producing that visual report that we could go out to our client and just, again, help educate them. So it wasn't something where, we were trying to, sell a certain product, but we wanted people to know that there was value in these longer term products. Because when we'd show them the presentations, we'd go out there and simply say, what line do you want to be, or when do you want your insurance to end? And this was a kind of a big catalyst because, Larry would ask people in these meetings, when do you want your insurance to end? And he would wait until they broke the silence. And sometimes people, well, what do you mean? Like, when do I want my insurance to end? And a lot of they think about it. And essentially, they come back, well, I want my insurance to end when I die. And we would go into the report, simply scroll our mouse across the age and say, at the point you think, obviously we don't know when people are going to pass. We know that they will, but we don't know when. We would say, wherever you think you'd like to pass, generally people think about 85 to 90. What line would you like to be in terms of the graph on the chart? And again, it almost made it a no-brainer for people to say, well, look, if I really do need insurance for life, or I'm going to have liabilities for life, I want the permanent product. And again, throughout looking at, sort of that siloed information that, again, classically reserved in his filing cabinet, waiting for that renewal letter, we essentially proactively batched all 700 clients of his and created a report for every single one of them. Again, it gave us that scale to be able to go out and educate all of our clients on their different needs. Now, LDA today does this from your independent advisor all the way up to full distributors. So we have many distributors that use our product and get monthly and weekly feeds brought in, where we'll automate again out to all of the advisors in the MGAs. And we even work with insurance carriers, batching out policy opportunities on their block to, pass down to advisors to alert them of, opportunities within their book of business. But it really did come down to aggregating kind of that information in terms of what do you have and what can you go back to? How many diapers can you go out and change? And then what can we show them to really quickly educate them on the opportunity in front of them? Again, things like conversions or exchanges are a fantastic opportunity, not only for your client, but also in building your book of business. And again, if you're one of those advisors who's looking at buying a book of business or selling a book of business, it's very valuable to have this sort of backup information. If you're selling, obviously you want to keep good records of, what has been done with the client, what's been presented to the client. And if you're buying a book of business, you want to know what's in there, how am I going to retain these clients, and how am I going to generate more revenue off of them. So again, it's been a phenomenal journey in the insurance world. And Life Design Analysis turns 10 officially, I believe in a few months. Yeah, it's been a fun ride, but I wouldn't be here without my stepfather and sort of bringing me in a lot of similar ways. I see Jake's story of kind of coming in and using visuals and trying to really communicate what's right for the client.
Beautiful. Well, Charlie, thank you for sharing. And I've known Charlie for about probably 5 or 6 years now. We've been volunteering on this Advocates Tech Committee. It's been great to see what you've been doing for the industry, and thank you for sharing some of your time. curious to see where the product goes from here. And I'm sure there'll be an integration opportunity at some point in the future with Advisor Flow. So, okay, cool. So I've got a couple of slides I'll run through, and then we'll open up the floor to Q&A. So first off, I do believe in visual learning as well, hence why we're doing these as webinars. Charlie and LDA, they do have a podcast series, so it's not visual but audio. If you're just learning more about the insurance world, I would check it out. They've got some pretty great topics on their podcast series. So over the last few years, CRM 1, CRM 2, these have led to kind of KYC and KYP requirements for advisors. You know, on the investment side, several dealers chose Cap Intel or similar tools to standardize this. FISRA on the insurance side, they are fining agents for unsuitable sales of life insurance. And so why I'm bringing this up is there's going to be an increased need for advisors, insurance brokerages, and MGAs to ensure that their advisors are not only creating reason why templates, but also are tracking the discovery process. And really that's the area that Advisor Flow is focused on. Now, many MGAs and dealers, they distribute PDFs to advisors and say, hey, here's the templates we want you to use. But frankly, that's difficult to track and it's not intuitive for advisors or clients. And so what we're doing at Advisor Flow is standardizing the data collection during the discovery process. So just like LDA is standardizing insurance presentations for those apples to apples comparisons, we're trying to make sure that the process is seamless for clients and the compliance process is standardized for advisors. As organizations push out changes within Advisor Flow, these are automatically reflected in advisor accounts, which will greatly reduce NIGOs. The same goes for teams. Advisors that are creating within Advisor Flow and pushing out to their team now will follow those new processes. And it's all API mapped data collected in one source instead of a bunch of PDFs stored in places that might get lost. So Jake explained his model for success. He's got templates he builds off of for his complex cases. No matter where you are in your insurance practice, you're going to need to house templates somewhere scalable. Excel might work short term, but longer term, as you're expanding your operation, that's going to become increasingly challenging. With Advisor Flow, advisors are using our templates to build their own. And we've, of course, got our baseline. So intro survey, financial overview, risk survey. And we've recently rolled out an insurance needs analysis, which is available as of today. We're going to continue expanding our integration ecosystem in 2024 with the intent of making your practice even more streamlined. And at our last event, we talked about niche marketing. And we also talked about solo practitioners and how they're probably going to have a hard time going forward. And the reason I'm bringing this up is even Jake's firm having multiple advisors and my firm, we're growing that as well. It's impossible to create standardization without technology. And so whether it's client data gathering, CRM, financial planning, as well as who your MGA and dealer partners are, you should be thinking about where those products or where those companies are going, because you want to ensure that your practice will look the way it wants to 5 years from now. So I'll invite Jake and Charlie back. We're going to transition to open Q&A. I see we have a few questions that have come in so far. Before we get into the Q&A, I'm just going to throw up a quick poll. This is just with regards to our next event. Let's see here. So you should have a poll pop up on your screen. We've got 3 potential topics: growing a multi-advisor practice, placing hard to insure policies, or compliance. It's like growing a multi-advisor practice. Yeah, not surprising. Yeah, I had a case recently. It was a backcountry skiing case and got it rated. So the topic on placing hard to insure, I've been going through that myself. So I was curious if other advisors were into that. Okay, looks like growing a multi-advisor practice. That event's likely going to be in March, and I'll be working on finding some speakers for that. All right, let's move into Q&A. We'll go Brady Bunch style for this. Welcome back, gents. I saw a question come in here from Joe. He said, what are the fees you charge to work with you? And Jake, I think that came in during your session. So if you wouldn't mind speaking to that.
Yeah, that's a great, first of all, I will say I had that exclusion for backcountry skiing on my policy and recently had it removed. So that is a tricky one. On the fees, it's a great question. It's something that's been coming up more and more. So we don't charge anything for any of our fees. We just get paid on commission from insurance that comes out of it. But more often it's coming up from clients that are sort of seeing the added value, the integration with other professionals, all the financial planning, the check-ins, and they're saying, they want to pay something, or they'd feel more comfortable paying something. So we always kind of say it's a bit of a leap of faith that clients have to make, that we're going to do the planning and not just sell insurance at the end of it. We make the leap of faith that we're going to do the planning, and we'll probably find some insurance because, again, it's usually overlooked. That's kind of something that, I had the opportunity to work with my father for the past 15 years, and he kind of gave me that patience to say, like, it'll come. And there's files where we do a ton of work, and at the end of it, we're the ones saying you don't need any insurance. So I don't think any of the professional services commissions or compensation models are perfect. Nobody likes paying accounting fees or legal fees or anything, or management fees. But I think insurance compensation is the worst. So a lot of room for improvement there. But I haven't found a perfect model yet, and I'd love to hear from somebody if they have a better solution.
Yeah, I do fee for service for full planning, but I'm positioning, investment or insurance products. My insurance cases likely aren't as big as Jake's, and I'm not a specialist in just insurance, so makes sense. And I'm sure the circles that Jake's in, most of the people he has a relationship with, they're not just going to take all his advice and go across the street. So
yeah, hopefully not. But no, I was at a KLO event recently, and another advisor told me that she was starting to charge all of her A clients $5,000 a year, just sort of table stakes. She didn't take that off for any insurance, but I really like that, just in terms of like taking a bit of the hesitation off of reaching out to clients, going the extra mile, some bit of compensation. And then she did a fee for other consultation on wills and things like that. So there's something there, but for now, we're not charging any fees.
yeah, I charge $2,100 for a financial plan, and then if they choose to proceed with any recommendations, they can. But it's it removes the hesitation. Like, oh, are you going to try to sell me something? It's like, well, no, these are the things you need. If you want them, great. If not, totally cool. We're square regardless.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we got another question coming in here for Jake. It's from Simon, and I encourage anybody else who has questions, please throw them up in the Q&A. Can you talk a bit about your CRM transition, why you did it, what your current platform does that Equisoft didn't, and how was the transition and learning curve?
Sure. So it's just a pain in the ass digging in your CRM and cracking open that can of worms. We were with Equisoft, and as of like last KLU, was like, we really need to make this better. We tried to work it with them. Where they sort of lost our confidence was we were trying to get our emails integrated, which is pretty table stakes. And they said, can you delete a few emails? Because your emails are too big. And I said, how many? And they said 40,000. And I said, well, that's ridiculous. So we just wanted to be with a more modern platform. One day we'll get these data feeds from the carriers, which is a whole nother conversation. But we wanted to be with more of a modern platform that if we were able to get data feeds, or we get better data, then we can use it more effectively. So first of all, we found a consultant that was able to really help us navigate. I was meeting with people from Salesforce. That's a huge investment for something that I think is too much for our business, our practices. So Zoho was a great platform, modern platform. And then the consultant that worked with us, this guy, company's name is Blue Root. His name is Massimo. He's fantastic. And then the learning curve, we're in that learning curve right now. I say right now, we started about September, and about a couple weeks ago, we were sort of back to where we were with Equisoft, with a lot more integration, a lot better visibility of our data. And then from now, a lot of the automation we want to get going. So a lot of the stuff Charlie's talking about in terms of automating touch points and things like that, we want to get going through our CRM. I admittedly, I'm watching Charlie's presentation being like, why don't we work more with LDA? So that's probably my next call after this.
Your PPI, you do get the feeds through PPI and their Amplify. That's LDA as well.
They didn't work for us, Charlie. I didn't want to say it on here, but they didn't work. So we've got a lot of old feeds that are from different antiquated carriers and things like that. So we're a very high maintenance case. But it was a good reminder to go back in. And the idea is like Charlie's already built, all the stuff that I'm talking about. So it's a good reminder to go back in there and revisit that.
I think the important thing is the best system is the one you will use.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I could rant all day with this. So Brandon, just cut me off whenever you want. But we were looking at, going to Salesforce, and it kind of looked like you needed to hire somebody just to manage Salesforce. And it's such a big investment. And at the end of the day, it was like, it doesn't really seem that complicated, And again, Charlie's software is like, it seems like it's already there. So again, why reinvent the wheel if somebody's already done it for you?
Yeah, and eventually all these softwares will talk to each other. So doing my best to bridge the gaps, but it's going to take time, and it requires us to share our feedback with our MGAs, our dealerships, in order for these changes to happen. Yeah, it's not an easy feat that we're trying to accomplish here.
I will say, sorry, Brandon. You also prompted me in that one of the things on my list that we're working on is automating our data intake for our plans. And again, it kind of goes along the theme with our working on our CRM and putting that investment into our CRM was like, how can we basically earn more, increase our revenue by doing less work, right? Automating a lot of that stuff. And so that's where we're putting more investment into data intake. So, I'll be revisiting the advisor flow and, working on our CRM. And there was something out of the book, The One Thing, whereas, what can we do today that will make all things redundant or unnecessary tomorrow? So it was all along that theme of really creating efficiency so we can spend more time on the complex cases, working on those teams. That's where we want to spend our time. But so if we can just find value in our business through this technology, it's just going to be good for everyone.
Agreed. Let's shift gears and talk a little bit about acquisition and book of business acquisition. So I'm buying a block end of next year, and as a senior advisor who's been in the business 40 years, I'll certainly be using LDA to look at insurance opportunities in that block. But I'm curious, Jake or Charlie, what you've seen in terms of success stories or perhaps learnings from insurance block purchases, because I know it can be complex.
I mean, go ahead, Charlie. You probably see this a lot more.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, from my experience, it's really just knowing what's in there. I mean, the multiples that people are paying are actually quite low because of the risk of churning those new clients or them, changing the agent of record once there's no more relationship. So I think, one of the biggest things is setting that foundation and looking in, knowing what you're really purchasing. So what I always advise people of is, it's very timely right now, but load in that book of business. Look for things like how many term policies are out there, how many of them are urgent opportunities or fall within those kind of time criteria. I also say, run a search and look for how many YRT policies are out there. Seeing some of these MLM sort of shops come under fire a little bit. I saw a really intriguing stat that they still had about 20% of the market, of the insurance market out there, which means there is a lot of YRT. If you're acquiring a book of business, those are opportunities, again, to really help your client and sell a product at the same time. And for me, those are kind of the win-win scenarios that I really like looking for.
Yeah, I would just add to that, from an advisor's point of view, it'd be very intimidating to buy a block of business because you're basically buying, a list of phone numbers to call and service and manage and, basically start almost from scratch. So having I wouldn't even consider it if I didn't have something like LDA or like a very well-refined CRM to sort of manage all that data, curate it, automate where you can. It's up until this point been very intimidating, but now there's with Charlie's stuff, it makes it a lot easier to think about buying new blocks of businesses, which I think we all know the average age in the industry is getting up there. So I think that's going to be a big opportunity over the next 10 years.
Agreed. Yeah. As I think about that, we're obviously talking about tech integration, process, people, making things smoother for clients and advisor firms. But what hasn't changed? So you guys probably know this better than me because you have dad and stepdad in the business. But what hasn't changed in the last few decades, and what do you feel is not going to change going forward?
Insurance is still sold, not bought. One of the things I would love to see change, where consumers sort of wake up and say, hey, today's the day I buy an insurance policy. And I think, all the things we're doing, talking about marketing and CRM automation in terms of, getting our messaging out and keeping that top of mind. I still don't think that narrative's changed. I think we've kind of seen the success of some of these B2C companies, and it really does take an advisor to illustrate the problem to you. So I think that's one thing that hasn't changed, but I would welcome that sort of change because Canadians, are drastically underinsured.
Yeah, I would say along that line, it's in a different tone. It's still being sold. It's still, Charlie's saying it still has to be sold, but it's also still being rampantly sold out there, even at the high level. We still come across a lot of giving second opinions on strategies that are just being sold without any planning at ridiculous levels. And when you just take a very basic planning approach to what are they trying to solve, it's really able to crack in there pretty easily. So, where I would say there's a lot of very technical planning being done. So I'm seeing more of that, but it's sort of this balance of strategies being sold, but at the same time, a desire for more integration amongst professionals. So the requirement to sort of know your stuff from a tax planning point of view, really know the details of the policy are becoming higher.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And when we think about these direct-to-consumer platforms, do you come across these policies with clients you're speaking with? Like, personally, I haven't come across many, but if you do, like, what's your opinion, and what can our industry do better to protect consumers from buying products they don't really understand?
Yeah, I think it's the education piece. I mean, I don't know. I personally don't see very many, just based. I'm not an advisor, so they don't really come across my desk that often. But just in terms of, I kind of pay attention to the results that are out there. I think the biggest thing with a lot of these B2C products is, again, it's that know your, KYP, know your product. So a lot of them are sold non-convertible, non-renewable. Which, if that saved you money, that would be one thing, but traditionally they're the same cost or more expensive. And so, it's no extra cost to work with an advisor. I think that's kind of a common misconception out there, is that, oh, there's this person making a commission, so it must be more expensive. When the reality is, if I go through an independent advisor, I'm much more likely to get a lower cost, better product. So I really think it's that communication gap that's out there. We as advisors, and on the advisor side, I know we're all working towards it, but we need to make it, the reason they're going there is because they think it's easier. There's less friction. And so, we as an industry, we need to take that friction away. There's a reason why you can sell an investment in, 2 seconds with no risk to your client, but insurance can drag out for months and months. And we need to fix that if again, we're going to change even, some of those behaviors of people waking up to say, I could buy an insurance policy today, and it's not going to be, a huge process. It's not a daunting task.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's, where we sit a lot of times too, is we don't come across a lot of the direct to consumer products, but what we're trying to build is that hybrid of advice and efficiency or ease, making it easier for clients to sort of understand it, making it easier for them to administer on it. Even things like the applications, like you think about DocuSign, how much easier that made everyone's lives. And it's also, it also helps us represent ourselves in a more modern light, as opposed to saying, we're the only ones that are going to come over with a contract and a piece of paper for to sign. So it's sort of pushing our businesses in the industry along in terms of modernizing these things that make the processing easier, make us look better in front of our clients, but then also still delivering good advice. You think with the people that are buying those products are probably saying, well, I've got this is my mortgage, so I'm going to buy this much insurance. They're not thinking about, well, once the mortgage is paid off, they still got 2 or 3 kids at home and this and that, and all the other pieces of the puzzle that advisors are going to ask, and that maybe they're not going to think through on their own.
Well, gentlemen, we're at the top of the hour. Thank you to all of the guests who joined us today. Thank you to Charlie and Jake for sharing your time and expertise. We will get a recording out to everybody, but yeah, any final words before we say farewell, gentlemen?
No, I'll just say, I like these platforms because I like the conversation amongst like-minded advisors. And so I know we always talk at KLU and we kind of have that platform, but I really welcome any other opportunity to get to create these conversations, and any feedback, you know where to find me. I'd love to have to continue this discussion.
Yeah, I'll just end off by saying it was a pleasure speaking with you guys today, and thank you everyone for watching. And best of luck in growing that book of business. If you do need any strategies, don't hesitate to reach out.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. And thanks everyone for joining. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
See you guys.